Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Raise the Vibe interview. In the studio today, I have Katie Randall. We're going to be talking all about the energy of money. I hope you enjoy our show. Thanks, everybody. Hello and welcome to Raise the Vibe. This is your host, Liz Peterson. Today, my guest in the studio is Katie Randall, and we're going to be having our conversation about the energy of money today. Katie is an island resident here on Vashon. She is a financial well-being professional and planner, helping people with all aspects of their personal finances, cash flow, investments, retirement and educational planning, insurance, and estate planning, and tax and charitable strategy. Her passion is around all aspects of feminine finance and our relationship with money. She loves opening conversations about worth, confidence, origin stories, accountability, power, and finding what is sacred to every person. She's also a wife, a toddler mom, aspirational gardener, weekend cook, and nature lover. Her precious alone time, she recharges her batteries through her spiritual practice and meditation, quiet walks, audiobooks, and podcasts. Katie, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here today.
It's fun to be here.
Cool. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about how you got into this area of employment?
Yeah,
Around finances.
Yeah, I studied finance, not because I knew that's what I wanted to go into, but I wanted to be in the business department in undergrad. And finally, they said, look, you have to declare a major. You can't just study general business anymore. So I picked finance because I just felt like there was this interconnectedness with money in every part of our lives. And I was really enjoying those classes. And I had no idea what I was going to do with that. But now that I've been in this career path for over 14 years, where it led me was helping individuals with their money. So helping families, helping individuals, and it's the most fulfilling career path. I couldn't have expected it, but it's been really, really fun.
Awesome. So we were discussing a little bit before we opened, and you said that you've been working for 8 years, working personally with people. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's right. I started my career as an investment analyst, and I was working with primarily big institutions and doing institutional research on money managers, which sounds really sexy, but I didn't have that connectedness to who the end user of that was. And so when I had the opportunity to become an advisor for individuals and their families, it was like the light bulb went on for me. Cool. And that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years.
Okay, and how do you do that? Can you explain a little bit?
Absolutely. Cool. So I'm what's called a personal CFO, or a holistic financial planner, meaning any money topic that you have, my clients call me. So they could be sitting in the middle of a car lot and saying, I thought I was going to buy this car with cash, but it looks like they have a great financing offer today. Or should I lease a car, actually? You never thought about that. To anything to, we just had our first baby. How do we save for college?
Awesome.
And as someone who just had a kid last year, that resonates with me.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So really anything's on the table in terms of what I talk to my clients about.
Okay, and recently on Vashon at Co-Housing, you had a money circle. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. One of my passion projects is talking to people about their inner lives with money. Specifically, I love working with women. And I think that women have a lot to talk about with their money because it still is very taboo to talk about money. I think for anybody, but especially women, I don't think we have a lot of community. We may not talk to our friends or our family about money. And what I mean is not really the numbers, like the dollars and cents, but our interactions with money, the energy that we have with our money. Are we saving? Are we spending? Are we getting paid enough? All these different aspects. And so I love hosting conversation circles like the one at Co-Housing with a group of women so that we can have a safe space to talk to each other about our money and encourage each other and cheer each other on and share what's working, what's not working. And specifically what we dug into in that conversation was our money origin stories. And we all kind of have some kind of origin story with our money, just like we do with love relationship or other relationships in our lives.
Great. So what started you working with women in groups?
Well, I just think there's this power of when you get a group of women together, and I also work with couples and men, and I love all of that as well. But
Of course.
specifically, in most of my career, even though I am pretty young, I was almost always the only woman in the room. So working in finance, it's one of those fields that is still pretty skewed towards men. And I think that's true of a lot of like STEM and other careers too. But I found myself, I was the only female on most of my teams when I was kind of coming up the ranks. And now I work for a firm where we have amazing representation in all roles across both genders, but for a lot of my career, it wasn't like that. And so not only was I experiencing that kind of lonely feeling professionally, where I felt like I was the only woman in the room, but also personally, I feel like there wasn't a lot of discussion among my friends or even in my family about money and success and what does that really mean? How do we define success? What are our values? Are we spending our money in alignment with those values? How do we feel about our money? Maybe it actually really stresses us out. I just don't think we have a lot of voice to talk about those things.
Why do you think that is?
Ooh, it's a loaded question. I think a lot of it's societal. So it's just like our programming. And it's a lot of the inequities that have existed for eons. I think that still is perpetuated. The financial system was not built for women, and it was not built by women. There's a lot of solutions coming out now of companies that are trying to change that. There's a lot more female leaders that are creating their own financial companies that are trying to solve this problem. But I think historically, it just wasn't created for us. So no wonder we don't feel like we have a tremendous voice in that space. And then I think a lot of households probably look like this, which I see a lot and happen in my family too, which is either the masculine partner, if there is one, manages most of the finances, or like for my family, it was my dad managed all the investments and my mom managed the checkbook. So it's like there was a separation of roles, and maybe the partners were talking with each other well about that, but in a lot of households that wasn't true.
Right.
So I think just giving women more of a voice, and I've worked with some really powerful breadwinning women. These are not timid women, right? But it still remains true that when you look at research, the research will tell us that when scored, like they take a survey, women will score themselves as being less confident, and they will score themselves as being, they think they're less competent as well.
Oh, wow.
But truly what happens in these surveys is that women and men are equally competent with their finances. And actually women tend to be a little bit better risk managers of their money. But
so is it a confidence?
It's the confidence. Right. And so how do we get women talking more? How do we get women feeling more confident and empowered? And that's what I like to do.
Cool. What do you think some of the belief systems around money are for women?
Well, that's really can be unique to everybody. Like I have this very kind of frugal Midwest upbringing. And so one of the stories that I always heard was like, every dollar needs to be hard earned. So there's like this deservedness around money.
Right.
And so if you're not efforting, if you're not, it's very performance driven. And money's tied to that. And so then, gosh, how does that impact someone like me who's heard that their whole life about what our worth is? Maybe our worth gets them very tied up in what we do, what we contribute, and then how does that impact, your own worthiness? And so I think for everyone, it can be a little bit different depending on what their origin story is, but that's some of the programming that I had that's been fun to uncover.
Interesting. What other, so you've been working with clients, so what other things have you uncovered through your clients? What other things have you seen?
Yeah, I work with a lot of couples, and that's always really interesting also because I'm married. So it's like, I also have experience with sharing a checkbook and finances with somebody else. But that's an area that's always fascinating to me, and everybody has their own wins and struggles there. So whether it's those power dynamics I was talking about before, of like maybe the majority of the finances are being handled by one person, or you might just marry someone who's like the yin to your yang, like you have a saver and you have a spender. And oftentimes I find both of those personas in a marriage or in a committed relationship. And so those are just number one, it's awareness. It's like, how do you bring awareness to that? How do you make sure that these two people who want to stay committed to each other can accomplish their goals and feel comfortable, feel heard, and also not feel like they're like derailing their life, because there's one person that likes to spend more than they save, and then the other person is a little more frugal. So I do a lot of what feels like relationship counseling in financial planning.
Cool. And then with a couple, and you're dealing with their belief systems, like say one always heard and like what you heard, and then the other one always heard, like money, it always brings problems, something like that.
Yeah. More money, more
just
problems.
Right off the top of my head. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
I think so. Since you said this is a safe space to go woo-woo,
Totally.
I personally think that there's such an energetic connection that we all have to money. And at any given time, we either are creating like a safe environment to have a healthy relationship with money, attract more of it in, and really feel abundant. That's what I think it really is about. It's, do we feel like we're abundant, and are we cared for? Or might there be things that we're doing to repel it? And so if someone who might have this belief that with more money comes more problems, then maybe they're doing things to repel money and they don't even know it.
Interesting. It's funny. I was listening to a podcast this morning through Mind Valley, or one of someone else. It wasn't Mind Valley, someone else, but they were talking about feng shui, and they had a big thing about abundance and arranging your home and stuff like that around. It's like, sure, the woo-woo stuff. Are you actually, do you do that kind of stuff too? Because I was looking at my house this morning going, where could I improve and declutter and, put a little here and a little there to kind of bring in abundance for myself.
Yeah. I've dabbled in feng shui. I'm not really studied in it, but I have, read a little bit about that. And I guess everybody has a money corner area of their home. And so I read a little bit about that once, and I had noticed that like the money corner of my home is like just a disaster. Like there was just like, it was a very unloved corner of my home. So I kind of tidied that up. And then another exercise was like, what does your actual wallet look like? Or what is your,
interesting.
What are all the places in your house that you might have money that you have no idea? Like maybe there's a family member that gave you a gift card that you never spent, and there's a check that you haven't cashed yet, and your wallet has a bunch of receipts and it's kind of cluttering things up. So like, how do you feng shui the really simple day-to-day relationship that you have with money? That's something I did, and it was very fruitful. I found all these like gift cards and gift certificates that I didn't know I had, like money and birthday cards. I was like, oh wow. So awesome. Yeah.
Are there other tools and techniques that you use personally to for your relationship with money?
I'm a huge advocate of meditation. And that kind of probably feels like old news with all the mindfulness that's like the research that's come out.
The better.
Yeah, I think mindfulness is a huge part of it. And for me, that looks like a meditation practice every single day. And it also looks like being really intentional in our household, where we avoid my husband and I, a conflict with talking about our money, is like being in good headspace. So being very intentional when we come together. We actually set like money dates. We're like, okay, tonight when the baby goes to bed, we're going to talk about our money. We're going to like make these decisions. And usually we try to come to that with a lot of intention of how we want this to go, making sure both of us are feeling fairly relaxed, and just monitoring like where are the anxiety levels, because sometimes these conversations are so triggering for couples that one of them just ends up being like, oh, forget it, like, or just going with the flow, or maybe not having their concerns heard because of those tensions and those triggers that we all have. So I think having the awareness around it and the intention is good.
Cool. So what do you do when the power struggle pops up? Because it's very much a root chakra. If you go with the chakra system, the root chakra is connected to safety and survival, and money's very much wrapped up in that safety and survival. So how do you work with that when they're like, someone's like feeling threatened when we're discussing money, and feeling like they're out of control or not able to control, the other person, with the way that they want to do things around their money or the joint money?
It's a great question. I will caveat all this by saying that I'm not a therapist, but I'm just dangerous enough through this work, working with a lot of families. This comes up a lot. what my job is in a lot of those instances, I feel like, is just making sure that each person has a voice. And so what I found is one of the things that's inherently wrong with the financial services industry is that, again, it wasn't built by women or for women. And so oftentimes that feminine voice, if we're not intentionally the loudest one in the room, can get lost. And you've even seen it before where, people turn towards a masculine partner and say, what do you think? Just assuming that they're the one that's holding all the purse strings. And in a lot of the couples that I work with, that's not the case, right? But I try to be intentional about talking to both people in the relationship, or even as they're integrating their children into that conversation. And I think giving each person a voice in that space. But I've also had to, with one couple that I worked with who was having a very difficult time talking to each other behind closed doors about a particular money issue, I had them come in and I gave them a talking stone. And I said, okay, husband, you get to talk as long as you have the stone in your hand, and you get to say every single thing that you want to say. And wife, this is a hetero couple, you don't get to interrupt while he has the stone in his hand. And then we're going to switch. And so they were able to get everything out, and then they got to switch. And it was then and only then that they had all the cards on the table, that then I helped them sort of mediate what came out of that. But that's one technique I've used when it was necessary.
Great. So why don't you, let's dive into the energy of money. So what do you mean when you say the energy of money?
Yeah, I've always thought that money it's a tool. I think it's been glorified to be something so much bigger than what it is, but it's a tool. It's sort of like a means to an end. It gets us from one place to another, and it's an exchange. So, when I go to the farmer's market, I don't have a garden right now. I'm planting one this spring. But, when I buy those local goods, I'm exchanging that farmer's time and their effort and their expertise for food, right? So my money then is just an exchange of our energy. So I save the time and the effort, but that farmer put the time and the effort in, so we can just exchange in that way. And, that's really what a society we used to have looked like. Yes. And now we just have agreed this money has some value. I think where money gets too much energy assigned to it almost is that there's this really interesting book that I love called The Soul of Money. It's by a woman named Lynn Twist. And she talks about how money has become almost this god of sorts in our society. Yeah. To where we question every single thing that we do every day. We question our leaders. We question whether we should pay taxes. We question our partners. We question our God, our religion, our spirituality every single day in various ways. But it's almost like we never question the power of money. People think it's sort of like the end all be all in a way. And that's feels kind of screwed up, So I am a financial planner, so I do help people save for retirement and save for goals. And that's really important as long as that's aligned with your values. But to the extent that it's just gathering wealth with no end goal in mind, or just because you have fear of scarcity or something like that, that's where I think it gets a little overblown, and maybe we're putting too much value on the money itself.
Could you speak a little bit about scarcity?
Yeah. Oh man, there's so much I could say. Personally, I think everybody struggles with it. I personally struggle with things like time scarcity. So, I think that's really big in our culture. So yes, everyone's so busy. And so I think time scarcity is sort of an epidemic. I struggle with it a lot. But even I think what you're talking about is money scarcity. So no doubt there are people in our world, and a lot of them, right? I was born white in the US. By that fact alone, I have a ton of privilege. And so I will never experience a lot of the true scarcity that a lot of people on the planet do. And with that being said, I also think that a lot of people who have a lot of their needs met, that have wealth that the rest of the world will never see, still are scarce. They have a lot of fear around whether it's, money going away, love going away, time going away. And it really is like it's insidious. So I mean, it doesn't really matter your level of wealth. You can experience abundance and prosperity and health and well-being at any level, and you can also experience scarcity. Like we've found that in our research, at the end of the day, a lot of women, no matter what their wealth level, this question that it all boils down to is like, am I going to be a bag lady? That's like their fear. So that's a scarcity fear, right?
Yeah.
So
I experienced that. You know, how am I going to continue to support myself? Where's my abundance going to come from? How am I going to pull that in? Yeah. Big questions.
Yes. So I like, for me, the really getting back to being grounded, which I do through meditation, being in nature, talking to someone that lifts me up, like a friend who has the same spiritual beliefs, or my husband, and just like regrounding is the way that I kind of fight that day to day scarcity, time scarcity, money scarcity, whatever it is. But there's also like deeper work to do too. Right. And I think as a society probably as well.
Yes. So when you say grounding, can you explain to the listeners what you mean? I know what it is, but can you explain to the listeners, for people who might not know what grounding is?
For me, it's like what I do to bring myself back to who I really am. Because we can borrow a lot of fear and a lot of concerns from other people. You know, like I walk through downtown Seattle on the days that I commute into work, and even just energetically, like, you know, I borrow concern for people that I see on the street. I borrow concern from my clients. I borrow a lot of concern from even my spouse some days. And that gives me like a certain, maybe that puts me more into my scarcity fear, or more into my, I don't know, it's like I get off kilter.
And I love that you're using the word borrow, that you're borrowing these things, you know, instead of taking them on or absorbing them or something. I like that word borrow, because something that's borrowed you can get back.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I do. I find that I'm as an empath, and also as someone who, I call it over responsibility syndrome. Like I worry about others a lot. And so I tend to take that on. So then how do I get back to who I really am without all that fear, without all that excess worry, or even that scarcity mindset of like, ooh, how did I spend my day today? Did I spend it well? How did I spend my money today? Did I spend it well? There's all that worry. Like, how do I just get back to who I really am?
Yeah. How do you get back to who you are? Do you have any tips?
Walking alone for me. It's like walking alone, journaling, meditation, listening to good music, physical activity of any kind, trying to be hyper present with my kid.
Nice.
Like phone away, just in this moment, nothing else matters. Like that totally just takes me back. So
that's beautiful. Those are beautiful ways of coming back to center. Well, thank you for sharing those. Cool. So let's see. Energy of money and our relationship with money. How do we discover our relationship with our money, or money in general?
I like to do this series of journaling exercises, and this is one of the things I love doing in these conversation circles. And one of the first things you could ask yourself is, what is the most poignant money memory I have from as early as possible? It doesn't have to be like a childhood memory. Maybe it's from your teens or early 20s, but what is that poignant money memory? When I say, ooh, like what comes to mind? Like what would come to mind for you? Do you have a memory that was money related from?
Oh yeah, totally. The first thing that popped into my head was a conversation that my parents were having in the kitchen, and then Dad storming off, back to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then what I like to do is like unpack that a little bit more. So maybe either consciously or subconsciously, you had a takeaway from that. So like, what's the storyline that might be in your brain?
Let's see. Money discussions cause conflict would be popping in.
Yeah. And so then, just to take it another step, where in your life as an adult, like you're not that kid anymore, right? But where in your life as an adult has that been true? Like, have you had money conversations that have caused conflict?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's definitely manifested and mirrored in my life for sure. Yeah, past relationship.
And so true. So like that's, my origin story, if you will, has played out in various different ways in my life. So it's always interesting. And I come back to that question over and over, and I've held over a dozen conversation circles now. And I always have something new to journal about my origin story.
Wow.
So it's interesting how you can keep coming back to this and unpacking it, and probably new things will come up. But then, like, another question I like about this is, like, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about your relationship with money, what would it be? And what would it really give you permission to do?
Oh, interesting.
And so,
do you have some examples of that?
Yeah, I think going back to worthiness, I think comes up for me a lot in these conversations, but also in my own life and my work with my clients. I think worthiness is a lot of the reason that's like the root issue of why we might have trouble with money, why we might repel money in certain ways, why we have conflict. Do you truly believe that you are worthy of things, not just money, of love, of, respect, of health? Health is also tied to prosperity in my mind. So
definitely.
So what is your like worthiness story? I think that's at the root of a lot of that.
So during your circle, when you were discussing worthiness with the 7 or 8 women that showed up, how did you approach that with the group? And what can you share some stories around worthiness for our audience?
Yeah, so what happens in circle stays in circle, so I can't discuss any personal stuff.
Sorry.
But it's okay. It's just like a really fun container to be in, because we can all learn from each other and have these epiphanies. But what I think the beauty of the conversation circle and why I like hosting it is that we're not there to solve each other's problems, but we naturally learn and teach and have these like light bulb moments with each other.
Right.
And there's like in the last one, there was a woman that was 18 years old all the way up to one that was about to turn 80.
Awesome.
And there's still so much that we can share in, like, ooh, we have that common connection. Or, here's something that I did that helped me. And so I have no shortcut for, how someone can foster more a feeling of worthiness, but for me, it's like, let's at least get out of the shadows. What are those sticky things in our money relationships, or what are those stories that we've been unconsciously telling ourselves over and over again, or like programs that have been running?
Right.
A lot of this is just programming. Maybe it was programming from like your family relationship that is now unconsciously like replaying over and over. Well, even just like you saying that to me today, there's like more light on that now.
Yes.
So how can we just shed more light? And I don't mean to make this super, super deep. I can go really deep on this. This is all just my own personal practice. And
you're so belief. Welcome to go very deep on Raise the Vibe.
But even just the idea that with worthiness in a practical sense, asking a friend, wow, you keep telling me how you keep taking on more and more and more responsibility at work. It sounds like you're just adding so much value, crushing it. I hate that term, but like you're crushing it. And are you getting paid for that? When's the last time you asked for a raise? Are you getting a promotion? Are you getting a title change? Those types of things. So I think having the vernacular to tackle those topics too is just as important as the energetic work.
Nice. Do you want to go into a little bit about value?
Yeah.
Personal value and money? Great.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Well, again, in my own life, in my own experience, a lot of when we're talking about like feminine finance in particular, historically, we're kind of coming up from behind the curve, right? So not only was like the financial system not built for us, but for a lot of
it wasn't inclusive at all.
Right. Yeah. And so how do we value ourselves? I've had the epiphany going back to work after having my kid. That was last fall, so it's been about a year ago. I've always been very like performance oriented, and I've always been able to, in like past careers and things, if I know I'm hitting a specific number, I'm getting a specific bonus that year, And so then it got really tricky when my value was very much tied into my performance or my job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fast forward to maternity leave when I'm, 36 years old, and I've been in that system for such a long period of time. I have this really firm identity with who I am and what I do and how I make money. And then get this new baby plunked in my lap who just totally upends my life in the best possible way,
Mm-hmm.
and gives so much more value to my life than it ever had before. And so then I go back into that world, and I love my job, but it is performance oriented in some ways. And just the idea that we all go to work and perform in some way and we get a paycheck in return for that. A lot of people suffer from this, where their value is their financial value. And what I found so tricky going back from maternity leave was that, like, I felt very unproductive at work in that reentry period for a long time, because I was pumping 3 times a day. I was coming in later. I was leaving earlier, and like my priorities had shifted, and I was trying to figure out this new phase. So like productive or effective or efficient is like not really what I was feeling. And so that really, it took a hit on me, but I was like, wait a second. Productive. Like, I was the most productive I have ever been. I produced a human being. I am keeping that human being alive. Mm-hmm. I made a new family. I became a mother. Like, how much more productive could I have possibly been? But that's not our typical definition.
Like a redefining of yourself.
Yes. So I think like that was my trap that I was in. And so if there's any way to give other people the tools to like figure out, how are you defining your value?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a personal journey for all of us, but that's been part of mine. And I also believe in advocating for our financial value. We shouldn't be like underpaid and underappreciated. Mm-hmm. I'm also a huge advocate of that. Like, women in particular don't ask for raises. No. They don't negotiate for promotions when they take on more responsibility. And this isn't to say that we don't have a lot of really confident, like, badass women. I'm saying that what research shows us is that women don't ask.
Yeah, we're not taught to do that work. Yeah.
Yeah. And we still don't
comply.
So like super competent, like talented, well-educated women still don't, by and large, don't negotiate for raises and promotions.
Wow. Ladies, step into your power and negotiate.
It's really funny.
Katie can advocate for you.
I've heard this phrase. It's like, have all of the confidence of a mediocre white man. And like, I'm married to a white guy and I love him dearly, and he's just my love. And so I say this in jest, but I mean, for anyone who needs to get more confidence, what I've heard is that men will, by and large, apply for a job that they may only be like 60% qualified for. We women will only apply for a job if we are like 90 to 100% qualified for that job. So even just from the get-go, we're sort of shortchanging ourselves, because we're like, ooh, and maybe that ties back to the value. Am I worthy of that opportunity? Am I worthy of that much money? Am I worthy of applying for that job? Well, men would say, yes, they are. So why can't we be? And it's just like reprogramming some of that inner dialogue.
Wonderful. How would you suggest we go about doing that? And say, okay, we have a room full of clients here in the studio, and we don't. How would you address that situation to them?
Yeah. Well, how much time do you have?
30 minutes.
For me, there's no like shortcut, but the way it's looked like for me is a lot of spiritual practice. So how do I untether Katie as a human being from Katie as an employee or, a self-employed person, entrepreneur, whatever it is? Because those are two separate things. So that takes a lot of work, just all of us, right? Doing our own individual work. But we can take micro risks. Like for me, a micro risk that I can take is the next time I go to have my performance review, like I'm gonna make one comment about my compensation, or maybe like if I ask for a raise and I don't get it, don't stop. What's the next little micro risks that I can take.
Mm.
Maybe it's like, okay, I would settle for 1 or 2 more days of vacation time this year. Like, these are things that are very small. I mean, they seem really huge. I'm just saying, like, one of the first jobs I ever had, they weren't able to give me a raise when I was working my ass off. And what I really cared about that time was not necessarily the money, it was travel. And so how can we like make this work?
Mhm.
So I just finagled more like paid time off from them, and they were more than happy to do that. Because they're
Nice.
like, okay, good, we don't have to explain this raise to anybody. We're just going to give them paid time off. I know there are some people that don't even have the benefit of paid time off. But what are where I get bogged down, where I think a lot of people get bogged down, is how do we fix the whole system?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, like, how can you take a small step in your own life,
Mhm.
which then will eventually, like,
ripple out
yeah,
to create change in other ways. Yeah.
I don't
Great.
know if that gave you what you. Again, we could talk
A
about this
little
for a long
bit.
time. But yeah.
So let's go into our origin stories. Can you talk a little bit more about origin stories? Because you've touched on it a couple of times. Maybe explain that a little bit more and how people can investigate that.
Yeah. So, but kind of like that programming that we were talking about, I think that we all are sort of like given this programming that just sort of plays out over and over again in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, shedding a light on it, and then figuring out how to slowly dismantle it will stop it from perpetuating. Like, I think about some of the patterns that I've had that I don't want to pass along to my kids. So that gives me like an incentive to figure it out.
Right.
But if one of my origin stories, let's say from my rural Midwest upbringing, is that, money only comes from hard work. So then it's no wonder that I've had a very like performance-based view of what my value is and how I get money and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so then in a lot of my spiritual practice, we learn through meditation, through connecting with ourselves, like we all have value. It is inherent, right? So that's a path I've had to go down to dismantle some of my stories. But I want to make sure I'm answering your question. I guess the idea of, like my money story was performance based, so it took a really significant life event to kind of help dismantle that.
Right.
But these conversation circles, for example, when we go into these investigative questions of like, what's the first money memory? How do you feel about saving and spending? What's the best thing you've ever spent money on? What's the worst thing you've ever spent money on? What do you regret? What do you want more of in your life? Then what are the 5 values that you want to be living by? Are you actually doing that? Is your money going where your values are? Like, then you can actually see, if it's not clear, if it wasn't clear to you before, how might all these different origin stories be playing out? So it's hard to really see in the day-to-day how that's happening.
Right.
But if you see like, ooh, here's a mistake I made. Ooh, here's something I'm really proud of. Here's where my values, where I say they are,
Mm-hmm.
but is my money actually going there, or is my time going there?
Yes, yeah, can you break those down a little bit more? I think you named like 7 of those. Can you walk through those? Totally. Well, that's because you kind of breeze through it. I like to like slow down and kind of walk through each one of those, because those were great. Yeah, great questions.
One of the best ways that we can live intentionally, mm-hmm. kind of break free from some of this origin story programming, let's call it, about our money, is shine a light on how we really want to live. Let's be intentional. Let's get awareness around it. It's very like Deepak Chopra, I guess, right? Attention and intention.
Yes, I love it. A whole class in school about attention and intention.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And so, are we really doing that? Like, if I were to tell you to write down the first 3 to 5 values that come to mind, it would probably be pretty easy for you to jot them down. Mm-hmm. Like, mine always kind of shift a little bit when I just jot it down.
Right.
But it usually shakes out something like this: family, spirituality, prosperity, nature, and adventure, or something like that. Mm-hmm. The last time I did it was like joy was in there, all these different things. For some people, it's luxury, religion, connection, peace, whatever they might be. But it's not really until we take inventory of how we're both spending our time. So like physically looking at a calendar and seeing how you're spending your time.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I know people don't really balance checkbooks anymore, but looking through maybe your transaction history of your bank account or your credit card and saying, like, where is the money going? Is it going to family? Is it going to charity or my church or whatever you say is your value?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you really living that? Because that integrity of those things and being really on purpose, that's how you make sure that you're not running some unconscious program that your family gave you about money and you're actually doing it on purpose.
Okay.
So one of my favorite exercises, which is not about money, but is about time,
Mm-hmm.
which again, we all have time scarcity, I think, in this society that we live in.
Yep. Check.
You know, if you were to write down those values and then you were to write down like, ooh, this is an ideal day. Like we all only have 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is even more powerful because it levels the playing field. Like money, we all have various levels of money, various levels of privilege and all that. But time, it's pretty universal.
Mm-hmm.
Like whether you're a CEO of a company or you're me or you're you or whomever, like we all only get 24 hours. So what's your ideal 24 hours? Like, write that out. How much sleep do you want? How much time with your family? Time, maybe you really want time in front of the TV or the computer or doing the work that you feel like you were meant to do in the world, exercise. I feel like my husband's would be like almost all exercise, but or something. Then comparing that to how you actually live out your day. And we all have to make choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can't all live in like a dream state, but what I'm kind of looking for is like, where are the easy wins? Where am I out of integrity? Like I know I say that I want to have more time for myself, to be taking care of myself, and I want more time in nature.
No,
I would for
check
sure
and
say
check
that.
for sure. Those would be in my top two for sure. And I'm always trying to schedule that yoga time, that meditation time, that walk in nature for sure. Yeah. And sometimes the day goes by and it just doesn't happen because I've overscheduled myself for those work or kid activities or something like that. And all of a sudden, poof,
So
the day
like,
is gone.
Where did we say yes? Where we should have said no?
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, where did I get down a rabbit hole on Netflix, like binge watching something, and that took away from my time I really could have been present with myself instead of being on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And I love me some TV shows, so I'm not judging. I'm just saying I do it. I do it right.
Myself.
And so that's like a little area where I'm out of integrity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to know that. And then
interesting.
Money is the same way. So I think that there's been a lot of advice from people on the news or Susie Orman, who's like,
oh, I love her.
Like, stop buying lattes, you know? and I'm like, okay, Susie, that's a little austere for some people. Maybe some people really find value in this habitual coffee routine every single day, and that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't want to give up their latte. They'd rather give up something else. But let's just be aware of it. Like, otherwise, you're spending maybe like $300 a month on lattes, and you have no clue.
Right.
And so what would you do instead with that $300? Is that like your first savings for a trip that you want to take with your family, which you say is, you know, one of your values? So I think that like shining a light on that and getting
Mm-hmm.
awareness is really important.
Cool. What else would you suggest for our audience or listeners around money and integrity?
Yeah. My challenge would be just talking to a friend, which, you know, we talk to our friends about God knows what, all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like sometimes I say more to my best friend about a specific issue than I would to my husband, or maybe I say it differently.
Right.
And
there are different ears for different issues.
Right. Totally. So why can't we also talk to our friends about money? And I would say that specifically for women, because again, it has been so taboo, and you just need to like build some muscles. And even if it's uncomfortable to talk about money, like I'm not saying disclose to your best friends how much money you make or how much money you have in the bank. I'm saying those little things like, oh, I read this article. I'd really love to talk to you about it. Or, you know, have you asked for that raise? Or I know you were really interested in taking on more responsibility in your job. Like, how is that working out? These are all things that are very tied to money and how we're valuing ourselves, and just getting more reps at talking about it is really important.
Nice. Cool. So how do we discover what our money story is personally? Do we look towards our past, or is it better for us to look at what's going on presently?
It's a great question. I think it's a combination of both from what I've seen. Usually it's kind of like a symptom and a bigger problem, if you will. Like if you were like a physician, the symptom might be why you're going in. Like for my clients, the issue that they're bringing to the agenda for our meeting might be like a symptom. So it's the easiest like whack-a-mole thing to talk about, whether it's like a credit card bill or we have to buy a new car and how do we tackle that, or my wife wants to give all of our money to Planned Parenthood, but like we also need to make sure that we can live, whatever that is. And then where's the tension? So that might be the issue at hand. That might be the symptom of how things are playing in our lives today. But then there's always more to the story. So there's the history of what's been going on in marriage, what our money origin stories are. So it's definitely a combination. This is why there's a rising occupation in money coaching and financial therapy. Those are two occupations that they're real and that are becoming more and more prevalent in our field because of the fact that there's more awareness around this. Like, there are so many ties to our money that are not practical and linear and easier to understand. I mean, not that money is easy to understand anyway. There's so much information out there about money, but there's an undercurrent, right? We all have inner lives around money.
Can you give a couple examples of that?
What would you like examples of?
That money story, that undercurrent that's running, in our relationships.
Sure. So, probably the one I see most is this programming that a lot of us have had. I alluded to at the beginning of there's one that handles the finances and there's the one in the family that does all the other things. Like someone manages the house and someone manages the finances, and that might have been modeled to them, very likely. Right. So in a stereotypical household in the 50s to 70s, let's say, you might have been like raised with a family like that. My parents had a separation of roles as well. And like my grandparents did too. For example,
my parents as well.
Yeah, when my grandpa passed away, my mom had to teach my grandma how to write a check. She was 60-something years old at that time. And that's not surprising because, women, for example, weren't even allowed to get credit in their own name until the 70s without a cosigner. And that cosigner was usually their dad or their husband. So it's a lot of programming, right? So that plays out. So let's say my generation, we've seen that in our parents and our grandparents. And so I've seen it naturally, like a lot of very, you would think empowered women who are amazing at what they do, amazing at earning money, and have seemingly healthy marriages, but still hide from their money, like in a way that's, they don't want to manage it. They don't feel confident enough to make those decisions, and they delegate. And I think there's a healthy amount of delegation that people can have with their money, but to delegate it to someone, either a spouse or a financial advisor, with the idea that you don't ever want to deal with it is not a healthy way of going about it. Like it should be a healthy, open relationship or a healthy amount of delegation. So, for example,
how do we get over that ancestral programming? I'm sorry, you were going for example, you might have been going into that.
Well, I guess just as
so
an example there, what I've seen in a lot of households is there's like a joint debit card or a joint credit card, and everything gets charged on the card, and all the spouse knows is that it gets paid off, and the other spouse is managing all the things.
Right.
And so that was probably just modeled to them. And just to play this out, like I deal with a lot of unpleasant things with finances of families, and that can be death, that can be separation, that can be divorce, infidelity, either financial infidelity or otherwise. And so one of the ways to cut these, this programming, this unhealthy relationship with money is like, it's just communication. It's like putting all the cards on the table. So I had a couple where one of the spouses just knew all the things got charged and it got paid off. No idea how, no idea how much money they made, spent, saved. Just knew it happened. And so in my mind, it's like you need to at least know enough that you are not 100% dependent on your partner.
Right.
Like, you don't need to be the one who manages all of it, but you should for sure know how much money you have in your savings account. You should know how to access it. You should know your login and password for
Right.
all of your banking. And so these are just some of the ways that we stay disempowered, or just totally give our power away.
Yeah.
So it can be as
That's
simple
what
as
was popping up in my mind.
yeah. And it's not that a lot of the couples that I work with are in bad relationships. But can you imagine if you stay disempowered, or you stay with that level of like full delegation to the person?
Mhm.
What happens if the relationship deteriorates? What
Right.
happens if someone dies? Then you're completely closed, and you're coming like from a really significant place of disempowerment, trying
Right.
to come up that learning curve. So I don't think it's everyone's responsibility to be 100% managing their money all the time.
Mhm.
But I do think it's our responsibility to at least have enough empowerment where we know where our money is and where it's going, and is it going to our values, and is it ample to provide for us, and all of that.
I think that would be a great class. I was actually thinking about teaching a class on that, or writing a chapter, about that, because we are one extreme event away from a completely different life.
Yes.
And do you know what's going on, and are you prepared, not only personally and emotionally and spiritually, but financially and otherwise? Even how much are you invested, in that relationship, with money, with your partner, and how are you invested in your outer life too, with other relationships and support and stuff like that.
Totally.
Yeah. And then where is that going to leave you if something happened to happen? How would you be prepared? Are you supported? And do you know what to do?
Yeah. Are you going to be
Or
okay?
are you going to be able to manage? Are you
much-
going to be okay?
That's so important. Like,
Yeah.
how much enmeshment do you have in your relationship,
Mm-hmm.
your personal relationship with money, and also if you have a partner, and how dependent or enmeshed are you with your partner and money? And I think it's okay. Like, my husband and I manage everything jointly. That might not be for everybody. And I'm not here to say that. There are
Mhm.
really specific reasons why people would manage money separately, but like, do it intentionally.
Yeah.
Do it really intentionally, so that there's no surprises and there's clear boundaries. And I think, more on the energetic side, what you were asking about, kind of like our personal histories with money, and our maybe ancestral stories with money.
Yeah.
It's a lot of like reparenting work, I think. So a lot of the work that I do for myself, whether I'm feeling really scarce, whether I'm feeling like I don't have enough, or I'm not performing well enough, or whatever it is, or maybe I had a not pleasant conversation with my husband about money, whatever it was. A lot of it comes back to like reparenting myself. Like, wow, where was I feeling threatened like this before?
Mm.
Where have I felt like I didn't have enough before? Where is this feeling coming from? Because I know we like to project a lot on other people, but usually it's an inside job, right?
Yeah.
And that's true with money, and I found it's true of like a lot of different things. And so, but it gets really hyper pronounced, especially when we have dependency on certain people for money.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's what I spend a lot of time doing in my personal work myself, not necessarily with my clients, but like that reparenting exercise of like, oh, I felt like this before, and let's go back there and let's try to like clean that up so it doesn't keep playing out over and over and over again.
Nice.
So,
That's great advice. Yeah. If there's one thing you would like our listeners to walk away with, what would that be?
I feel like the integrity with who we really are and our money is very important, because I feel a lot of people have scarcity, that scarcity of money, or even just living in the Seattle shadow of what's going on in the real estate market, and with people who work at Amazon in their backyard. And I help a lot of those people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it gives us a really skewed sense of what we need, what we have. Is it enough? The comparison trap of that.
Mm-hmm.
That there's a lot of like really unhealthy and scarcity stories that get tied up in that.
Okay.
And so if you can just be really clear about what your own personal values are, and just do those little checkups of, am I in alignment with that? Is my money going where my values are, where I say they are? And if they're not, then either two things are happening. Either you need to clean up where your money's going so it's in line with your values and who you really are, or maybe those aren't really your values. Maybe your values are somewhere else, right? And that's okay too. It's just like, be aware of that. And I do see that like scarcity or comparison trap a lot, and I'm also guilty of it myself.
And what does that look like?
It looks like, going to a friend's place and thinking that they have more than you do, or it looks like looking at somebody else's marriage and thinking that they have it all figured out, or looking at someone's new car and being like, why do I suddenly hate my car? You know what I mean? Comparison is the thief of joy. And I feel like in our society with Instagram and Facebook and all of that, it's even more prevalent.
Yeah.
And specifically, it all seems it seems tied to money, right? Because it's always like people have this and comparing yourself to that. And so that, again, if you can ground yourself and bring yourself back to what your values are and where your money's going, can you be at peace with that? And I really believe that whether we're living off of, $50,000 a year or $200,000 a year, it can feel the same if you are living in alignment with your goals and your values, right?
Cool. Is there an exercise that you could recommend to be able to figure that out?
Come to my conversation circle. We'll do it together. Our next one is at co-housing. I think it's December 14th, but I'll get you that date.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had one at co-housing and it went fabulous. And you have another one coming up on December 14th. That goes probably around the same time. It was in the afternoon, like 1:30 to 3. It's like an hour and a half or something like that. And then do you have any other up and coming things that Vashon might want to be aware of?
Yes. So we're going to keep having the conversation circle once a month. It sounds like we're going to shift the topic every time. So this past time we were doing origin stories. We're probably going to start off with that this next time, but we also had some really fun and kind of spicy subjects come up, like more like money and power. Even someone was like, ooh, we should do one about sex and power. And so we're just going to have some really fun, like rotating topics. Think of it kind of like a book club. We'll keep it going.
And how can people reach you?
You're gonna, I think, tag me on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah.
I'm also professionally on my company's website, Brighton Jones, which is in Seattle, and happy to pass along my email as well.
Great. And then do you have a website or you go through your work website?
Yeah, professionally, I'm through my work. I don't do any freelance. I just really love talking about this stuff in my own time and doing conversation circle in my own time.
Awesome. Yeah. And then you also do work with love and relationships and finance. You're going to be doing any circles or anything like that or talks around that?
Yes, that was one of the most requested ones. So it was money and relationship.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. So we have about 2 more minutes left. Is there anything that you would like to share with our audience? Any advice or anything like that? Saving versus spending, or the energy, or anything we may have left out?
Probably my favorite question that I ask in the conversation circle, which I might leave people with because it really gets my creative juices flowing,
awesome,
is what's the best thing you've ever spent money on? The most satisfying, the most juicy, satisfying thing you've ever spent money on. And then, are there any areas where you have regrets? Like, some people are so amazing at living without regret, and I wish I was one of those people. But there might be something where you're like, oh, I could have done that better. And I think that's a really curious place to start from when you're thinking about your relationship with money.
Cool. Thank you so much, Katie. This has been great. Lots of valuable information. I'm super excited to check out one of your co-housing events. It sounds fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been great to have you on Raise the Vibe. And thank you, everyone, for joining me today. This is Raise the Vibe on Voice of Vashon's 101.9 FM. Have a great day, everybody. And remember to get out there and raise the vibe. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Again, this is Katie Randall from Vashon Island, and she can help you with your finances. And please join her at Co-Housing again when she has one of her circles coming up on December 14th. And again, how can we, is there somewhere you're posting or putting up where people can find out where this is located if they want to join the circle?
Absolutely. So my circle, I'm going to be circulating the invite on Facebook. I'm Katie Randall. That's my Facebook, and you'll be able to find me through the site. And then I'm also on Instagram. You can find me through Katie Randall as well. And my email, if you ever want to reach out, is katie.randall, RANDALL @brightonjones.com, which is BRIGHTONJONES.com.
Great. Thanks, Katie. It was awesome. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a great day.